What's up guys, it's Teaching Tuesday, so we're gonna go ahead and run through 5 tips that are gonna instantly make your photos better. You may wanna go ahead and get yourself a cup of coffee or some tea. They're very easy to implement and you can instantly get better photos by using these. This will apply from anything from your cell phone up to a DSLR, mirrorless. Some pretty easy tips today. They should make a big impact on your photos immediately. Let's go ahead and dive in. So let's start with number 1. We've got the rule of thirds. This is something you're gonna wanna enable immediately if you haven't already done so. It's gonna help you frame your shots better. Every camera has this option. I'm using a Google Pixel XL3, but I'm sure this is on your phone as well. The first thing you wanna do, go into your settings and turn on this 3x3 grid. What that's gonna allow you to do is focus and frame your shots a little bit better because now you can focus very specifically on these lines. What you wanna do is make sure at each one of these intersection points, something is relevant or something is eye-catching. Why this is so important is it's gonna help you focus on making sure that you don't have things right in the center of the frame. That helps you distribute things evenly across the frame and you're gonna get a much better shot and something much more interesting. So go ahead and turn on that 3x3 grid. There may be a few different grids for you to use. This one offers 4x4, 5x5. If you Google the rule of thirds, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's gonna explain it in detail. This is the general rule of thirds grid. It makes the most sense to use. And right away, it's gonna help you think and frame your shots a little bit differently, which has a very high impact on the overall shot itself. Let's dive into tip number 2. For this one, we're gonna hit the road, so we'll see you outside. Right before we leave, we're gonna go ahead and slap on the 24-70. This is a good all-purpose lens. All right, so tip number 2, take a lot of photos, especially when you're starting out. Photos are free. You can take as many as you want. The only thing it's gonna do is impact your battery and your storage on whatever device you're using. So take a lot of photos, have fun, play with framing, play with lighting to get an understanding of what shot's gonna look good. Ultimately, you only have to post that one pic, you only have to edit that one pic, but the more you take, the more samples you have to choose from. Now, taking a lot of photos doesn't necessarily mean just holding your finger on the shutter and leaving it wide open. What it means is play around with framing, walk around the object, see what the lighting can do. Can you bounce it off something? Do you like some lens flare? But play around with it. Number 3, lighting. Don't do what I'm doing here. You want to get off angle to the light so that way I can still open my eyes. The reason you don't want to go directly behind the light is because then your subject's going to end up squinting. They're not going to get a good shot. I can look into the camera, you can see my face, it's not blown out. If I blow it out like this, it's going to lower the f-stop. I can actually see the aperture lowering on the camera, which means it's not going to be as blurry of a shot in the background. It's not going to look as quite as good with depth of field. As soon as you go sideways, you can open up the lens and it's gonna take a much better photo. Rule number 4 is think as the viewer of the image, don't think of you taking the photo. The viewer doesn't have the context that I'm in a park, that I can turn around and see the sunset, that there's a statue right here. I may wanna take a picture really close to this statue. I may also want to get a lot of this park in, try to get the sunset in the background, really give that viewer context. So just remember that when you're shooting, you want to capture as much to make whatever focal point you want the most relevant, but still allow your viewers to see everything else to get that context of what you're shooting. Last tip number 5, don't be afraid to get close to your object, whether it's a person, whether it's a subject, depending on whatever it is, get close to it. Close doesn't necessarily mean physically close. One thing you can do is use telephoto lenses, so that way you can still get very close to a subject, even though physically you may be 10, 20, 30 feet from them. What getting close to it does is really creates that separation between the object and the background and gives you a good focal point. It also engages you more inside of the photo itself. So for example, when we're in the park here, we can take a look at a shot where we're kind of walking down the stairs in the middle of the path. It's not a bad shot. Okay, but if we go ahead and we get close to the stairs here, we can actually see a really good example of how we can kind of blur out the background. Mind you, this is shot on a Pixel 3 XL, so it's not a big sensor to begin with. Whew. Just finishing my coffee. Hopefully you guys are too, as we went through those 5 tips today. If you took away a single thing today, I hope that you learned something. One thing I want to touch on is what we showed you today doesn't affect whether you're going to do post-processing or not. So whether you're on a cell phone, professional camera, you may be using Lightroom, you may not. Let's do a quick recap of the rules. So we've got rule of thirds. Next, we talked about taking a lot of photos. Number 3, lighting. Tip number 4, think as the viewer, not as yourself. Last but not least, rule number 5, don't be afraid to get close to your subject. So that's it in summary, guys. Hopefully this was a quick and informative video. Go ahead and smash that subscribe button if you want to see more tips and tricks in the future, tech reviews, camera gear. Let me know what you want to see next in the comments. If you have any questions on what I taught you today, feel free to throw that down there as well. See you guys next time.